The Christmas Tree by Sarah P. Doughty. This is a Gimchon University presentation of a Project Gutenberg ebook. Some of the slides have more difficult words at the bottom with a definition and a Korean translation. The Christmas Tree. Oh dear, it is almost Christmas, exclaimed Mary Bradley with a deep sigh, which caused her younger brother Horace to look up from his book with surprise. "Why do you sigh about it, Mary?" he asked. "Are you not glad that Christmas is coming?" "I should be glad, Horace," replied his sister in a melancholy tone, "if things were as they used to be. What beautiful gifts we had last year! But father was rich then, and now he is poor." And again Mary sighed deeply. "I do not think father is very poor," replied Horace, laughing. "I am sure we have all we want. A good house to live in, plenty of food and clothing, a warm fire, and many kind friends. Do you call that being poor, Sister Mary? You ought to see some of the poor wretches that I meet sometimes on my way to school." "How foolishly you talk, Henry," answered his sister, rather petulantly. "You know very well what I mean. Of course we are not street beggars, but we live very differently from what we did last year at this time. Our beautiful house, our horses and carriage, and nearly all of our servants are gone." "No matter for that," returned Master Horace. "Father has paid all his debts like an honest man, and we have all we need. A small house is just as comfortable as a large one. The cars and omnibuses answer as good a purpose as our own carriage. And as to the servants, I much prefer waiting upon myself. As long as I have good Mrs. Betty to cook my dinner, it is all I want." "It is of no use talking to you, Horace," answered his sister, as she rose to leave the room. "But when you see what a bare Christmas tree we shall have this year, you will be convinced that we are poor." "We had more than we knew what to do with last year," persisted Horace, following his sister. "Suppose we hunt up about half a bushel of books and toys, and present them to Santa Claus for distribution. No doubt he will be grateful to us, for times are hard, and his purse may be poorly filled." "What nonsense!" exclaimed Mary impatiently. "I will not stay talking with you any longer." But at this moment the pleasant voice of their mother was heard calling them from the adjoining room. She had heard their conversation, and now replied to Horace's suggestion. "Your plan is an excellent one, my son, and I will try to put it in a form that will be less displeasing to your sister." "Horace talks so much nonsense," said Mary, as she took an offered seat by her mother's side. "A little nonsense, but a good deal of sense, my daughter," returned her mother. "Your mind is in a disturbed and unhappy state, and therefore you are not ready to meet his pleasant way of treating our troubles." Although Mary indulged in occasional fits of ill humor and selfish repining, she was really a sensible and very affectionate little girl. She loved her mother very dearly, and felt sad and mortified that she should have added in the least degree to her trials. In a few moments, therefore, she looked up with a cheerful smile and said, "I will try to do better, mother. I know we have every comfort that we need. It was only the thought of the Christmas tree that made me unhappy. but I will try not to think of it any more. Think of it in a different way, my dear Mary. Our Christmas tree will, I doubt not, be well filled, though with less costly gifts than you have received before. But how many there are who have no Christmas tree? How many who will even want for food and clothing on that happy day? Mary's eyes filled with tears, but she made no reply, and her mother proceeded. When the Lord, in his divine providence, permits us to meet with such trials as he sees to be for our good, we must not harden our hearts. We will not look back with regret upon the luxuries we have lost, but we will rejoice in the comforts remaining, and we will endeavor, as far as possible, to share those comforts with others more needy than ourselves. The proposal which Horace made in regard to your old books and playthings is a very good one. There are many children who may be made happy with what you now consider useless. Collect everything which you feel willing to part with, and I will add some articles of clothing. Betty can tell us of several poor families who will be thankful for a portion of our abundance. I will go and look over our things at once, exclaimed Mary. I have no doubt we can spare a great many. Come, Horace. And for the next few hours the brother and sister were busily engaged, not in useless regrets concerning their own Christmas tree, but in active efforts to prepare gifts to adorn the trees of children far more destitute than themselves. Betty, having been made their confidant on the occasion, took much interest in hunting up destitute families who were deserving of assistance, and Mary and Horace soon found that there would be no difficulty in disposing of their little stock. Long before the important day arrived, the gifts at their disposal were done up in neat packages and duly marked with the names of those for whom they were designed. Mrs. Bradley had added an ample supply of partly worn clothing, and Mr. Bradley, when he found what was going on, had promised to provide some articles of food to distribute among those who were most in want. Mary and Horace were to have the pleasure of presenting these gifts themselves, and they were now eagerly longing for the happy day, not for the sake of what they would themselves receive, but that they might have the happiness of imparting their blessings to others. Christmas Eve came at last, and attended by Betty, the children left their little parcels at their various destinations, and then, with their hearts warmed and cheered by the grateful words and smiles which they had received, they turned their steps toward home, that they might enjoy the pleasant sight of their own Christmas tree, which they rightly concluded would be brilliantly lighted up during their absence. As they turned the corner near their own home, they met a pale-faced, thinly clad little boy, with the small branch of evergreen in his hand, which he was carrying carefully along, as if he considered it a precious treasure. "Is that your Christmas tree, little boy?" asked Horace, as they drew near to him. "I found it!" exclaimed the child joyfully. "I am so glad! Now Susie and I can have a Christmas tree." And he was hurrying along, but Horace stopped him by saying, "Have you anything to put on the tree, little boy?" "Not much," was the reply, "but Susie and I have each got a penny. That will buy something." "Who is Susie?" asked Mary, as the little fellow was again hastening on his way. "My little sister, miss. She will be so glad that I have got the tree. I must go to her." "Come with us first," returned Mary, "and we will give you something to hang on the tree. I have a little doll for Susie, and some candles to light up the tree. The little pale face looked bright and almost rosy now as he trudged along with the children, still holding fast to his precious tree. It did not take many moments to fill a small basket with what appeared to the child great treasures, and his eyes sparkled with joy as a warm cape was placed upon his shoulders, and a cap, long since outgrown by Horace, upon his head. Finding upon inquiry that his mother was a poor widow residing in their immediate neighborhood, Mrs. Bradley directed Betty to fill another basket with food and accompany the child home. Mary and Horace begged leave to go with her, although they had not as yet given one glance at their own Christmas tree. It was a pleasant sight to look at little Susie as her brother eagerly displayed his treasures to her admiring gaze, and it was even more gratifying to witness the gratitude of the mother as Betty emptied the contents of her basket. After assisting in planting the branch of evergreen in a broken flower pot which the children produced for the purpose, Mary and Horace took leave and joyfully returned to their home. Their Christmas tree was indeed radiant with light. It seemed to the happy children that it had never been so brilliant before, for their hearts were filled with the delight of doing good to others, and this made all seem bright around them. Morning found the tree well loaded with fruit, pretty and useful gifts, which the children were delighted to receive. It was indeed a happy Christmas. They felt that they were surrounded with blessings, and above all, they rejoiced in the happiness of sharing these blessings with others. Merry Christmas to one and all.